All right. Hey there, everybody. Again, I'm Andrew King, editor-in-chief of Canadian Musician Magazine. Thank you for joining us for everything you need to know before entering the studio. Joining us this evening, Harrison Fine, decorated songwriter, producer, engineer, artist development pro. He is now Magazine's Producer of the Year, 2 consecutive years. You've seen him on the Shot TV show. You've seen him in the pages of Canadian Musician, as well as our sister publication, Professional Sound. Author, profilee, all over the place, harrisonfine.ca. We're thrilled to have him here. I will hand it over momentarily. A quick walkthrough. So we're going to first talk about locking into the right mindset, sort of a really big macro level here about just your identity as an artist, what you want to present with your art, and how that's going to factor into your studio prep. We're going to talk a bit about artist development. We are going to talk about your vision and how some market research is really going to help you realize that and help it stick with the people that you're going after. And then we're going to switch to your art. We're going to talk about songs, construction, arrangement of your songs. We're going to talk a little bit about the pre-production process. And then we're going to be back next month with a session entirely dedicated to that. And then, we'll talk about your budget, how you can make sure that you're making the most of your time in the studio. And finally, some more just creative bits of things like artistic sensibilities. And again, how that's going to factor into a productive, positive recording session. Here we go. This is Harrison's line here. But basically, everything we're going to be talking about today can be summed up in 2 words. Fail beforehand. Harrison, you started this whole thing with that nugget. Fill us in, expand a bit on what you mean by failing beforehand so that you can succeed later.
Okay, jumping right into it. Okay, so fail beforehand, what do you think that means? To me, what that entails is when you see content online, on the radio, when you hear it on the radio, whether you're watching a music video or looking at an interview such as this, fail beforehand is all the steps prior to somebody getting to where they are that you don't quite see, that to master anything, whether you're playing guitar, whether you're studying for an exam in college or university, whether you are trying to be a better runner, it doesn't come immediately. The music industry is very similar. It's like any creative form where you have to, where it takes time. And so fail beforehand means going out and proactively messing up. It means making mistakes. It's when a child is trying to walk, what happens? He falls, she falls. And so that's kind of in essence what this is. And there is a method to it. And at the same time, there's absolutely no method to it. You just got to get out there and do it now. Put the ego aside, put the pride aside, and just keep doing it until something happens.
Bang on. Okay, so jumping in, as I said, we're going to start with your overall mindset. So these are some general questions. Maybe they're things you've chewed on. Maybe they're things you've indirectly thought of. But yeah, this is going to basically be kind of your primer to, well, pretty much every aspect of your career, but absolutely getting into the studio and producing some art. So who are you, musically speaking? What do you have to offer the culture? Harrison, can you walk us through a couple of these? Just give us an idea as to, and maybe drawing from your experience with some of the artists that you've worked with and developed over the years, just how these factor into what we're talking about this evening.
Okay, so really what we are talking about is artist development, and that is something that's kind of misunderstood, where I find artists sometimes, not all the time, there's exceptions to every single rule, they tend to learn this stuff as they go along. Years go by, open mics happen, or these days online performances or Instagram Live. There's a lot of these that are popping up now, that with time we eventually start to decipher who we are as an artist, our artist identity. Now, I bet you most people here are over the age of 10, 15, 20, 30, whatever. The point is that most of you there can give me a sliver of an answer as to who you are as a person. Why I say a sliver is that we're always learning, similar with music. But the purpose of that is, as an artist, it's concurrent, it's identical, it's symmetric in that way, where to answer these questions, who you are musically, what do you have to offer culture, all these things, they take time, but they can be decoded through looking into yourself and seeing who you are as a person and what message do you have to offer the world. Now, you can say, why does this matter? Art should be it should be expressionist. It should be flowing. It should be off the cuff. Because whether you're doing that or you're sitting down to actually ask yourself those questions, it's going to happen anyway. You're going to have a styled performance, whether you're a keyboardist or a guitarist or a singer. If you sing like or if you go da 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 da, that comes from, at least for me, that comes from what I want to hear and who I am, my character, the way I dress, the way I interpret life. All of that is where'd the screen go, by the way? How do I go back to the
back to it for you?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just all those things make up the antithesis of these questions, which I'm kind of basing off as I'm going, which is why I appreciate them here. Thanks, Andrew. Sorry about that. So, do you get in your own way? Are you confident enough to succeed? I could summarize this by saying, what are your limitations? Where are you limiting yourself, and what haven't you discovered yet as a person? Music is about expression, whether it's Jimi Hendrix or Run DMC or Duran Duran or Howlin' Wolf. They all had something unique to share, and each one of those are inherently unique. So what is your iteration of these grades?
Bingo. And then, as far as bringing those raw materials and how they're going to manifest themselves and what we're talking about here. So artist development, general things you're going to want to do before you're headed into the studio. Let's talk a bit first about collaborating with skilled songwriters. Again, Harrison could speak to this from experience, but what are some of the benefits that, co-writing and getting out and just sharing ideas with other people in similar boats to you can bring?
Well, you quickly realize how much you have to learn. When you work with people that are far much more ahead of you, you quickly how do you put it? You're quickly, your ego's dethroned. And so if I'm taking a coding class, I don't know a thing about coding. If I have an ego to it, it's like, I understand this. You're going to have the teacher come along and they are going to put you in your place, and you're going to realize that you have a lot to learn. Blair, exactly. It never ends. I've been doing this for over, I don't know, we'll go with 20 years now, and I'm still learning. So collaborating with skilled songwriters, they can teach you things. They can give you an outlook on the music industry, on culture, on life, something political. What's wrong with the world? How do you see the world, and what do you want to say to people? This is a gift as an artist, is that you can quite literally go on a rant and actually have people care. Not many people actually want to hear somebody rant, but when you put melody and rhythm to it, all of a sudden people want to hear it. So collaborating with producers, it's the same thing. Replace the songwriting with writing on a macroscopic level. So writing, we'll go with like arrangement. When you're making music, you're not just thinking of a guitar anymore, but now you're thinking of the drum kit, of the bass, and so all these things, if you don't do this beforehand, you're just going into the studio with maybe a little bit of ego and Dunning-Kruger syndrome. You should look that up. And you know that. And so which one do you want? How do you want to go? Going into your exam, going back to the college reference, do you want to go in prepared, or do you just want to go in saying, I understand history, I got this?
Welcome, Charles. Songwriting, production, these are disciplines that have more to do on the creative side of things. But when we're talking about just growing our team in general, whether it is other creative types or maybe folks that help out on the business end, are there other members of an artist's inner circle whose impact, whose influence is going to directly or indirectly fall into what we're talking about getting poised to lay down some tracks?
Growing your team, to me, embodies the fact that music is a multifaceted art and art field where we're technically in the music industry, but music is like a third of it, man. It's even less, where music can mean nothing if you don't have a graphic to go along with it to call it album cover. It can mean nothing these days, at least for the last 40 years, if you don't have a music video to go along with it. And so growing your team is the same notion as any company that wants to start out, that you need to have skilled and talented professionals covering each sector, whether it's marketing, advertising, HR. In this case, the music industry, nobody can wear all the hats. And I dare you to try and wear all the hats and then come back to me and tell me if that worked. So growing your team, it's a necessary thing.
And then as we've got here, don't be afraid to reach out. What we mean there is, sometimes there's an intimidation factor to approaching someone who's maybe at a higher tier or maybe someone with a big public profile. But if you're carrying yourself with professionalism and distinction, there's really never any harm in reaching out to people and just being brief. This is what I do. Making it clear that you know who they are and what they can potentially bring to the table, and just trying to make connections. I mean, the worst thing is you get a no, and at least then you've been in contact with someone and have a new email address to lean on at some point.
Yeah, that's it. Like, I've had talked to people that I thought would never pay attention to me before. I grew up watching much music. I'm of that generation. And there was this guy, George Stroumboulopoulos, Canadian fame. He's interviewed some incredible people. He was my idol growing up. I love that guy. I love how he was poised and he was like really on the ball. He really kind of had this stern kind of look to him. Flash forward and I get the chance to meet him and I only have 5 minutes, so I need to impress him. And I'm just a person. I'm nobody to him. And so the point is that he actually listened because I acted with professionalism. I was kind. I didn't try and sell myself, but I instead say, hey, listen, this is why I think that we should care about each other. And there's never any harm reaching out to people that you think won't care about you. That's often the opposite, because people that have actually gotten somewhere have done the same thing. And so they see this as a level of bravery, a level of courage, a level of success. The successful person is the one that isn't afraid to reach out.
Bingo. Okay, here we go. Those were kind of, again, macro level things that just we want swirling around in our heads because they're kind of going to funnel down into what we're talking about here. But now getting closer to the nitty gritty here. So I've combined these into one. Your vision for your art, for your career, your overall identity, your trajectory, and then how that is going to reach your target audience, or how you're going to have to, I guess, finesse it to make the maximum impact on your target audience. So this is, again, I'm stealing from Harrison here, but work backwards from your ultimate vision. So that means identifying the big picture, no holds barred. What's the end goal for your track? What's the end goal for your career? How do those fit in together? Do you have any advice for people as to how they can, really chew on that question and keep it productive and focused and, not so much pie in the sky? Although I guess that's part of it.
It is, sure, definitely. Music is, in essence, if you hear the sirens in the background, pardon me, I live off Dufferin Street. And to me, music is perception. It's the art of perception. It's showcasing the world to somebody in a perceived light based on how I choose to see it or how I want other people to, whether it's a depiction of me or a depiction of some grandeur thing. And so, to me, working backwards from your ultimate vision is perception. Is that if you don't know what you're trying to say or do, if you don't have a vision of what you think the world should look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, then what are you doing? Why are you making art? Even if your vision is to bring back some of the essence of a past generation, like that's in blues music, for example. I grew up listening to Chicago blues, from Buddy Guy to Howlin' Wolf, Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters. And so it doesn't have to be something futuristic. It can be something, an ethic from a past time. And that is the ultimate vision, is kind of foraying to culture and society. What do you want? What do you think is missing in the world? It doesn't have to be blunt. It doesn't have to be like punk rock or hip hop where it's like, this is wrong with the world. I'm the Clash and I'm telling you what's wrong. It can be rooted in metaphor, usually is. And so what's the end goal for your track? Same thing, but on a more microscopic level. What's the end goal for your career? A macroscopic answer. What do you want to embody in the lineage and chronology of culture and people? Because that's really, in essence, what we are and what we're doing.
Yeah, and then when you ask like how does the song fit into that, that's on so many levels. That's the title of your song, how it's going to be packaged or disseminated. That's lyrics, that's production, that's everything. And yeah, so lots to consider. And well, yeah, and then what you're considering is how you're going to make the maximum impact. And I guess it's not always about maximum impact. That goes back to finding out exactly what you want from your music and your career. Who are you making things for? Are you trying to be commercially successful, or is this like a Canada Council of the Arts, just, sinking your teeth into something absolutely innovative, creative, and not worrying about commercial reception? But in this case, we're going to assume that is our end goal. So identifying your target audience, and give us an idea as to what goes into that. You've got a great place to start here with researching similar artists and maybe trying to ride coattails a little bit in a good way.
Sure. I just want to touch for 30 seconds on a comment. What about indie artists? They have to wear all the hats.
Oh, okay. Well, let's go to that. I was going to bring that up in questions, but fire away.
I'll be quick with it. That goes back to the building your team and being creative with it, where you'd be surprised at how many people want to be a part of something special. That's the nature of any campaign. And so just be creative with it. There's bartering. There's a plethora of different types of solutions to that. But we can talk about that later. And what's your target audience? Oops, sorry. That could be, move the mic there. That could be like researching similar artists, using right tools to reach them, using hashtags and sponsored posts. Discovering who your target audience is, to me anyway, that we don't like to define, most artists don't like to define themselves by genre. They hate it. It's like, hey, what's your genre? My own genre. But that is, it is definitely a section that is one way of looking at who your target audience is. And from there, you can have fun with it. Okay, let's say I'm a rock band. Okay, so what is your message again? And within that, we can look to social media, for example, to see what people are doing, to see what people are interested in. There's really kind of two schools of artists. I find one that are out to, it's more of the selfless and the focused in artists, ones that are aiming to make people happy and write music that is maybe more down the lines of popular styles. And then you have people that just want to be happy and just want to make music for themselves, but also want to reach out to people to see if they can offer a sliver of joy to them too. And so both of those really come down to what's going on with the world right now. And there's a lot of tools I use. I use LinkedIn. I'm on every single social network. I don't predominantly like them, but I'm at least on them to discover what's going on. And it's important to me to find little bits of joy within that so I can understand what it is that brings joy to those people. Like, for example, Instagram just announced the new thing similar to TikTok. I forget the term. It was announced a couple of days ago, but I'm on that now. I'm trying to say, okay, how does this make me happy? And how does my music fit into that? And there's really no right method to do that. Companies spend a lot of money on market research, getting in people to see, okay, where does our product fit? And we're only one person, so there's only so much we can do. But we can look to the greats, we can look to the artists that we enjoy and we embody, and the music that we're trying to sort of curate around and see, okay, how are they doing it and how can we pay tribute to that?
Spot on. Reels, thank you very much. Love, got a helpful crowd. Okay, so here we go. Talking about your music. And again, we asked this question a bit earlier from a more general sense, but here you go. We're about to hit the studio. We've got a song or a collection of songs that we know we want to come out of it with. So here we go. What are your goals with the art? Oh, and here, I jumped the gun a bit. Are you writing for yourself or others? Do you want to expand on that, or do we capture that already?
Well, we kind of already captured it. I mean, we can move on from that. Most creatives I've known, usually they know who they're writing for.
Okay. So then inspiring workflow. We've got some firsthand insight here from you as both an artist and songwriter, and then someone who helps others. Tell us a bit about kind of your workflow, or maybe some that you've known to be rewarding with clients.
Workflow is so much more than you know. It is one of the most important things. It is the reason the stories in the studio exist, with going back as far as you can from people and alcohol and booze and drugs and whatever you want to go with. Very PG here. But in a sense, that's all. Art is the embodiment of getting into the mood and connecting with some kind of waveform or sort of workflow that you just can't get when you come from work. Like, you need to go for a run. You need to do jumping jacks. I don't know, go outside and yell to the world, look at me, like anything that gets you into that headspace. So my workflow, when in Kensington Market, I would walk around the block. I would talk to people that I know. I would go grab these ginger shot things. I love them. They're great for the immune system. Hashtag COVID. And sorry, I had to do it once. And from there, it kind of, Kensington Market brought to me a level of culture and community, which got me into the mood, and it reminded me why I made music. And so that can be expressed in various forms. You can do that through Google search and Google things that you like, whether it's I don't know, that's your own thing. My workflow technically now is very program based. I know Ableton, Logic, Cubase, Pro Tools. I've been using Pro Tools forever. I'm using Ableton now because of workflow. It's a very important thing. I could talk for an hour on this alone.
Another great bit from Keegan, Elizabeth Gilbert has a great TED Talk about finding flow and inspiration. I think, is that the author of Pray Love? Is that Elizabeth Gilbert? I'm not. Okay. Someone can correct me there. I guess these ones kind of go hand in hand about getting feedback from fans and industry. The step before that, and I'm curious about what you mean by this, about imagine you're pitching your songs to your idols.
Okay. So oftentimes when we're on our own, there is less incentive for us to do our best. And so I've been telling people these days is that if you want to practice, do two things. Get a microphone and headphones, put it on, and see how bad you actually are. Two, and I'm saying this for me, I'm so self-critical. I'm not saying you're bad in any way. I'm saying that there's always, like Blair said, you never stop learning. So this is one iteration of that. Oh, sorry. Two is live streaming your performances to your friends and family on Facebook. That is the most frightening thing. I find these a little more frightening than talking to a crowd, because at least you can connect with faces in public. But so it's pitching to your songs to your idols, imagining that. It's like, if you don't do that, you may get in your own way. You have these limitations that we all have from childhood, whether it's family or whether it's your friends, or I was bullied as a kid. That had a large impact on what I thought my self-worth was. But the moment I'm thinking I'm pitching this to somebody that I really admire, none of that matters. I am going for the gusto, because if I feel like Prince is going to listen to this, and like, what is he going to say? I have no room for error at that point, and that really ups my game.
Very good. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And then on the other side of that is just not being too attached, not being too precious about your work. At least not always. Harrison said it perfectly, that there are exceptions to every rule. We'll touch on a few of those, answering some questions in a second. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's always some things that you want to hold on to as being absolutely integral to your vision that we talked about earlier. But in general, tell us a bit, as drawing from your experience in the studio, about just being open to criticism and ideas from other places.
Okay, so I think artists, when they aren't responsive to feedback, they feel like there's a threat on their creative vision, that somebody offering their idea will inhibit what they're trying to say, which goes back to what are you trying to say as an artist? We all have that, whether we do it or not, whether we know it or not. But what actually is oftentimes sometimes we get tongue-tied creatively. For example, to use another art form with Photoshop and visuals, or let's say music videos, I'm not an expert videographer or cinematographer, and my idea that's in my head may be transduced the wrong way, so that what comes out of my mouth isn't necessarily what's in my head. And that's where this education process comes in, where you have to work with songwriters, where you have to work with producers, because that transduction process is hard. And so on the other side, if I offer my idea, maybe it's for the greater good of the song, and that it's not stepping on your creative vision, but with a professional, maybe it's actually enhancing it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right on. Here we go. We've got a few questions. Feel free to fire anything at us in the meantime as we get to this. But yeah, speaking about Josephine's question that you touched on briefly earlier about basically as an indie artist, you are inherently wearing all the hats. Like, yes, that's true kind of in that you're the master of your own domain, and any decision that you're making is, going to be your own. But that doesn't mean like you don't have to wear all the hats. You're probably not going to take your own promo photos unless you happen to be very good at photography. But as Harrison was saying, you can find people that are good at this. It's not always going to be an exchange of money. It's an exchange of value. Other people might see the potential of what you're doing and want to get on board. Or if they don't, like maybe you can hire a photographer in exchange for writing a little jingle that they can use in a social media ad or something. And then beyond photography, like bio writing, highly recommend tapping someone else to write about you. There's little that's harder about writing about yourself. You're probably not making your own website, or if you are, maybe you're using something like Squarespace. All this to say, like, yes, you very much are the master of your own domain. And a lot of this does fall on you, but you can outsource the things that you need help with, or maybe that you're not good at, because you'll drive yourself insane if you're trying to be every little moving part of a burgeoning career in music.
So if I can add two things quickly, I want to say, to preface, we live in an industry, the age of DIY, where we have to be our own business person, our own manager, our own marketer, all these things. And I personally felt completely buried by all this last year in 2019, where I completely forgot why I was making music in the first place, because I had to wear all these hats, and it drove me nuts. I stopped making music for a while. Even now, I'm still finding my groove again. I've been doing this long enough. It's kind of the frog in hot water analogy. And so I want to say that behind every single thing here, I would say the most unifying point that you can possibly remember is have fun. Is that it's so easy to fall prey to this business hat thing, where you have to learn how this works and learn how that works. But if you're doing it because you're having fun, then everything will happen innately. Some things may be easier for you than others. And find your skill sets that are your strongest, and maybe learn how to do that yourself. Like for me, I've always been using Photoshop, so I don't outsource with that. And another thing too is that quality doesn't have to be like 8K, 60 frames per second, like 192.24. Like this stuff doesn't have to exist these days. There are some of the best artists in the world are taking shots with like photos with their cell phone and using that for what matters more so is how accurate you are to the vision. And that's why I keep stressing how important artist development is that you can just dive into it and you can spend $50,000, going back to the whole indie artist question, having to wear all the hats. You can spend $50,000. I know people that have done this and nothing happened because their vision isn't purified. They don't have anything to offer society. And when you're having fun and when you're doing it for yourself and when you're trying to answer a question in culture which you don't think exists yet, like I'll use a real world example for like COVID. What is this doing to culture? We're not, our social media, why aren't we connecting in person as much as we are? How is that impacting us as people? And how can you embody that musically using metaphor, rhythm, syncopation, instrumentation, arrangement, lyric, visual art? How can you say something while having fun? Everything else will come secondary. Like if you are actually enjoying this, then you're going to go onto LinkedIn and you're not going to second guess it. You're going to dive and say, hey, listen, this is what I have to say. And that's the driving force behind the music industry these days, where you cannot micromanage. You have to always retain that macroscopic view, that bird's eye view. Because if you don't have that, then you have absolutely nothing. Because especially in today's day and age, with the whole YouTube, DIY, peer-to-peer world, that matters more than ever. Because we all have a voice. The question is what's your voice, and do you have something to say?
Spot on there, and echoed by Timothy. A good song recorded poorly is still better than a bad song recorded well. 100%.
Yes.
Factors right into this. Now, Josephine, great first question. Thank you. And a follow-up, or I guess an entirely different second question. And Josephine, please clarify for us, when you say how many years in music does it take to become a professional musician, I'm assuming you mean like full-time musician. And even then, this is a pretty arbitrary one that largely comes down to you. Because I think there are people in both camps that probably became full-time musicians the day after they decided they wanted to be, and some people that chased that dream for decades and maybe never made good on it. But you're taking a great first step here by joining us, and maybe I'll hand it over to Harrison if he's got any insight to add.
I do. Limitation. I can't think of a single person I know that isn't limiting themselves in some ways. The greats, the leaders in the world, they all have limiting beliefs that either drive them forward. Like the athlete thinks that maybe they're not good enough, or they're trying to live up to their coach's demands. The artist thinking their music isn't good enough because they're comparing it to the greats. How long does it take to become a professional musician? My answer is, how great do you think you are in your mind? And if you think that you're a 2 out of 10, you're going to act like a 2 out of 10. If you think you're a 10 out of 10, you are going to drive forward. You are going to approach people way higher than you. That's kind of the nature. In Kensington Market during Pedestrian Sunday, this was when I was starting to believe in myself more. Of all people, John Tory came in, and no one was around him. I was like, okay. I went right up to the man and I started talking to him, and I started asking him questions about the music industry. And I started saying, okay, Kensington Market, what's happening here? What's happening with this? And we talked for 5 minutes. And that's what happens when you have a good mindset. When you think you're a 10 out of 10, you could start something tomorrow. But if you don't, it could be a decade or two. And I was that person in my 20s. I got in my own way, and I always ran away from possibility. It's very important.
Thanks again, Josephine. And Blair says, fun of my love for music led me to becoming an electric guitar maker. Only wish I'd done it sooner. Norfolk and Jarvis, Audio Technologies. Yes, norfolkjarvis.ca. I think I've got that right. Anyway, thanks, Blair. Let's roll on here. This is great stuff. Keep the questions coming. We'll jump on them in good time. So pre-production, as I mentioned before, we're going to do a bit of an overview here, but join us in 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 4 weeks and 2 days, because we're going to be back, same bat time, same bat channel, getting really intricate into pre-production, walking you through that so that when you're done here, done there with us in the future, you are going to be a pre-production professional. But we're talking about arrangement, instrumentation. Instead of me rehashing these, Harrison, please, if you can just give us a general overview about what pre-pro entails, and I guess more importantly, kind of what the end goal of the process is.
I find a lot of artists are always more prepared, at least when we were making albums on the second album. We'll go with the second time in the studio because we failed, throwback to the whole fail first. And so the first time around, we go in thinking, okay, here are my songs. This is what I'm doing. I have a message, hopefully, and I'm going to say it. But then you walk into the studio and you have somebody like me come at you and you say, okay, what instruments do you want? What's the arrangement going to look like? What does the song embody? What's the emotion behind it? Do you want it to build? Do you want it to start out? Maybe the intro should be cut. Do you want does the pre-chorus build strong enough to make the chorus really pop? Do you want a loud or a soft chorus? All these things can be overlooked, which is why you can hire people like you can hire producers. I don't want to say me, or going to a second point, I really believe that the person that's going to know the answer to these questions more than anyone is the artist that has the vision in mind, because you are you, I am not you. I will never be you. I can pretend to be you. I can mimic you, which is my job, but you're always going to have the view based on your life experience, based on your upbringing, based on what got you into music, based on what got you through life. And that kind of stuff, such as arrangement, instrumentation, these questions should be addressed early on. So for example, instrumentation, keep touching the mic, when you are looking at your song and you ask yourself, what does this song embody? What does the song represent? What does the song entail? The best way I can say it is, what instruments best represent this? A violin has a cinematic element, whereas an electric guitar has a raunchy element. And going into the different components of the song, do you want the chorus to be edgy, and what instrument should best bring that up? And so in your head, you feel when you're writing music, you feel emotion. And the job of this pre-production stage is translating this emotion into actual working components. And that is the sort of the antithesis of it, whether we're talking about instrumentation or arrangement, such as just the ebb and the flow, telling the story. What does the book look like? If you're watching a movie, how do you get to the climax without getting boring? And that's, again, that I could talk about that for half an hour.
Yeah, and on that note of vision for final product, and I want to set this up just for fun because it just came to me and I'm interested to get your thoughts. But yeah, about that vision for the finished production, and I've got like lo-fi and Spartan here versus all the bells and whistles. Like for example, Taylor Swift's new record, very intentionally, very rootsy, very Spartan, I won't say lo-fi by any means, but like the aesthetic there is very clear, very different from what she's done in the past. I also think of like Tame Impala, or like the first MGMT record, Oracular Spectacular, that like at the time, well, respectively, kind of came out and kind of took the industry by surprise in a lot of ways, just sounding like nothing else of its time, let alone before it. All this to ask, yeah, on that note about a vision for the final product, is there an artist, a record, a track that's come out in recent years that you can think of where like you've heard it and just thought to yourself, like, I have no idea how they got here, but this is incredible?
Sure. Billie Eilish.
Of course, yeah.
To me, it's the antithesis. It's so easy to mimic somebody, and it's easy to go out. Rock music has done this for a while, and I feel like that's a part of the problem as to why people lost interest. I'm out on a limb. People hate it when I say that. I'm a rock guitarist, though. I grew up in bands. I'm allowed to say that. But Billie Eilish is a brilliant example, because the opposite of that is going into it with no mimicry, saying something completely unique, doing it in a completely unique way. There's no reference point, and that is so hard to do. And Billie Eilish came in with this like gothic look to her, this kind of gore, Marilyn Manson-y type kind of look to her. But she did it married with the production style that's super soft, that almost makes it spookier. And all these things are metaphors of culture, and they're metaphors of through persona and production of what it is that she's trying to say. Her art, just like a painting, embodies a topic and a discussion in life. If you talk about it right down to the root level, it always is in reference or in mirror to something within life and culture. And she just came out guns blaring, and just no one is, at least now that's in popular culture, there's no one that, she just stood out. And there's always people like her. I can hear people. I can hear the conversation going, oh yeah, but she sounds like this person mixed with this person. Well, it's true, you can say that with everyone, but like when she came out, she wasn't mimicking anybody. Her visuals, her voice, wow. So anyway, yeah.
Josephine, thanks. Spartan and lo-fi, I guess by lo-fi, the opposite of hi-fi, but sounding not pristine or overly polished, sounding very real, warm, gritty. And Spartan basically just very simple and bare bones. You hear a vocalist, some reverb, and an acoustic guitar, and you can picture what the room's like that they're recording in versus a big Fall Out Boy or Loud Luxury track. Yeah, all right, we're good to roll here. Budget, and this is a key one for a lot of folks because, how well and efficient, how well poised you are, how well prepared, and how efficient you are in the studio is going to mean a lot for your bottom line. So as we've summarized here, if you are fully prepared and know exactly what you're recording, what you want that recording to turn into, you can, it's kind of like making a business plan. You can have a really accurate estimate of how much time you're going to need and use that to map out who you might be able to tap to work with you, where you're going to record ultimately. And as we say here, if you're not very well prepared, much like with a business plan or a marketing plan, things are going to get away from you here. Harrison, maybe you can speak from experience here and just some general advice on making sure that you're on point.
This is a fun one because it's like you can have the best people doing, with the best minds, and the projects still go over budget. It's there's so many factors involved, right down to the intention you go into the studio with. Once you get there, it's not there, and it takes longer to find your art and find your sound, or if you go in and something happens, or what if somebody cancels, or what if it's not translating the right. There's so many elements, but accounting that aside, there are basic notes that you can jot down on a piece of paper and say, okay, I am going in to record one song, and I want to hire actual musicians. And so this is where it goes back to the instrumentation and arrangement, that if you have a good idea of what the song should embody, then you can say, okay, I'm going to get a drummer on this, maybe $150 for the track. It can get much higher depending on who you hire. And you could say the same thing with bass, the same thing with guitar. So ask yourself, who's going to be on the record there? Do you want to hire a producer? Do you want to just work with an engineer? Do you have all this creative content jotted down already? That'll probably save you money there. And so know exactly how much money you have to work with, and then work backwards, and then come up with inventive ways of making that work. This is 2020. There are so many tools at our disposal to save money. Like when we're with releases, we're talking DistroKid, we're talking CD Baby, TuneCore. We can come up with really creative solutions for marketing that involves just being inventive and being smart. It doesn't always have to involve money. There's a lot of producers these days, and there's a lot of folks that are trying to build up their repertoire. Instead of working with someone that's well established, find somebody that's just sort of up and coming, and you two can collaborate and offer each other something. Again, going back to the indie hat thing and thinking creatively. My point is, don't try and follow that template, that archaic template of the past, because we are living in a different time. And but getting back to the nitty gritty, if you write, get a piece of paper out and get a pen out and write down every single purpose, every single person, every single thing that you think you're going to spend money on, and just add it up. It's like bookkeeping. It's just plan it out beforehand. There's no magic to it. I mean, yeah, CD Baby, it's fantastic. And so at the risk of talking in circles, I'm gonna stop there. Is that good?
More than good. Here we go. Okay, artist sensibilities. This is our last umbrella topic here, and then we'll jump back to some questions. Uche, great question. We'll get to that momentarily. if anyone else wants to fire some off here, yeah, you know where to drop them. I guess this is kind of a bit of a grab bag of tips and whatnot here. So maybe we'll just knock them off one by one. Practice makes perfect. Pretty self-explanatory. Perform in pressure-heavy environments to grow. I think that goes back to what you were talking about earlier about like live streaming with people in front of whom you feel particularly vulnerable, or in scenarios that might throw you off, a la live stream versus audience. Other examples there, Harrison?
Say that last part again. Sorry, I was reading. Could you
put other examples of environments, pressure-heavy environments that you can immerse yourself into to help grow and thicken your skin a bit?
These days, busking. That is the most terrifying thing I've ever done. I've performed at Dundas Square before. Simple. But busking in front of random people walking by that do not care about you at all. They just want to go home. They're miserable, frustrated, and this is pre-corona. Try busking. It'll force you to think bigger.
Fine. Production. Well, actually, yeah, we had someone earlier mention that they learned their way around Logic and Pro Tools. Was it? Yeah, use Pro Tools. Learn their way around Logic. There's a great one about learning a DAW digital audio workstation and demoing so that you can fail beforehand, as we spoke about. But yeah, I skipped over this one just because I wanted to tee you up for it. But the idea of production is the art of making records. There's a very crude analogy for this, that it can't save lousy chops, but I'm wondering, can you delve in even just briefly a bit more into like, what is music production to you? What is the job of a music producer, distilled to one or two sentences?
Taking what's in here and putting it on our speakers. It's everything in between, taking ideas and translating them into multimedia.
Okay. Josephine, we'll get to that cue in just a moment. You mentioned practicing with mic and headphones. It's funny, I tried for myself the first time a couple of months back, and yeah, you were right. You were right. Nice little knock at the ego. Not that
another one
to begin with. But there you go. Very good advice. And same about taping yourself and yeah, using your self-criticism as fuel. I think that came from a place of the idea that you are your own harshest critic. To end us off before we jump to questions then, can you give us a bit of advice onto, if we are our own harshest critics, like how you discern which of your self-criticisms is worth pursuing and which may be destructive in the end?
Okay, this is sort of when I get down to, this is when the borderline between music and life is very thin. Where I meditate. I think it's a brilliant technical way of understanding where my mind's at. It's a technique with no mysticism, no anything. Is we're always distracted and we're always looking here. I move a mile a minute. I am such a good example of this. And so self-criticism. To me, when I get into that place, I learn what is destructive and what is productive. And to answer that question, the reason I went to the meditation thing, and I'm talking walking, I'm saying going for a run, listening to music, anything that's meditative, that keeps you in that moment, that hopefully I'm answering the right question, but using self-criticism as fuel, it can be done in a very effective way. So as long as we're conscious and attentive of our own sense of our own self. At one point in my life, it was really deconstructive because I would get in my own way and I'd be miserable, I'd be sad, I'd be depressed, I wouldn't think I'm good enough. Now I know that's a complete pile of nothing. And so to use self-criticism as a fuel, the word that should be added into that is use it consciously. That you can't turn off the mind. You can't turn off that little inner voice that's saying, you're not this good yet. You're not as good as this artist. You're not as good as this person. It's always going to be there, no matter where you get to in life. I can't think of a single artist that doesn't have that voice. So use it. Use it as fuel. Use it consciously, but just know that you're going to make mistakes, fail beforehand.
Spot on. Love this. Thanks, Harrison. Thanks, everyone, for joining, for keeping the questions coming. We've got a host of them here, and here we go. Harrison, I'm going to tee these up for you. Where are we here? Yeah, rapid fire. There's one I wanted to start with in particular. Here we go. Uche's question. How do you get to the point where you don't sound like anybody? I think I know exactly where they're coming from here. But yeah, why don't you start off there, and I might throw in a tidbit afterwards.
It's an evolving process, because what gets us into music in the first place, at least for me anyway, is the artists that I loved. And so I really admired them and I wanted to sound like them. So the question is, what gets you beyond that is, to me, it's your desire to, and it's your desire to be yourself. And I find that through music, we end up learning more about ourselves than any psychologist, any school, any class, any therapist could ever teach us. And growing as an artist, again, throwing back, is pretty much in line with growing as a person. So when you get to the point of sounding like yourself, you know yourself and you know what you want to say, which is why artist development is so fundamental to this, is that you ask the question now, who do I want to be? What do I want to sound like? If you're giving a speech and the president is going to hear it, what do you want to say about the world? You have one opportunity to describe the world in how you see it. And that pressure, again, the whole pitching to the greats thing, that pressure is going to force you to say, okay, Harrison Fine, I see the world this way, and I think we could do this better. And so to answer the question, it goes back to that, where we can mimic artists all we want. We can look at the way they use rhythm and syncopation and counter melody and polyrhythm and yada yada yada, music theory, from triplets to blah blah, to slurs that we can do stuff with that. But I really think what's more proactive is asking the question, who are you and what do you want to say?
I would add too that there's a difference in sounding like someone and being derivative of something else. And I live in Atlantic Canada. There's an artist here who's over the last few years done fairly well, achieved some national recognition. They sound very much like a fellow, more accomplished, higher profile Atlantic Canadian artist. And it has kind of plagued them, hates the comparisons, or at least just the idea that it shadows a bit of their own art and accomplishments. But they've done really well. If your vocal style is similar to Springsteen's, and that's your true self, and I don't think that's something you necessarily have to shy away from. You can very much stand on the shoulders of giants in a way, or just, if you own that, anyone that listens is going to be able to tell the difference between, oh, this kind of sounds like Springsteen, but it's really good, versus, oh, this is just a Springsteen knockoff.
Let me say one thing quick to add on to that a good tip is start off with who you sound like and who you think you sound like, who you resemble or embody or admire, and then change one thing about that. So, for example, Springsteen, I always say his name wrong. It's dyslexia. And the growly power that he has to his voice, maybe you growly, but you soften it. Or the way you inflect, maybe you inflect a little different, or the way you land on the beat. Change one thing and go from there. So start with the people that you admire, if you can do that, but then kind of slowly move away, consciously saying, okay, I'm going to change one thing, and then record it and see what it sounds like.
Very good. Okay, this will be the hot seat rapid fire round. Not pertaining to before the studio, and Harrison, I'll have nothing to add here. So, when you're mixing a record, Harrison, how hot, how compressed do you go? How much do you leave for the mixing and mastering engineer? Can you give us some insight?
However much the genre or the vibe needs of it. Listen to what you think sounds good. I can leave it very dynamic, or I can compress it a lot. It's based on what I want it to sound like and what I think the track needs.
This will obviously be very subjective, but again, we've got you here. What's the best and maybe more importantly, easiest to navigate digital audio workstation? And Josephine says she's used Pro Tools and learned Logic, but didn't like Logic.
Depends on the genre again. If you're getting into EDM, electronic, hip hop, that kind of thing, I would say Ableton in a heartbeat. But if you're looking to record something more vocal or sort of organic, as for lack of better words, people go to Logic, and it's very, yeah, it's like what you said. Everybody will give you a different answer. I know a lot of people that say Logic because maybe they have a Mac. I love Pro Tools. Some people say it's complicated. Yeah, it's like driving a car. Everyone's going to say they like theirs better.
And Grimes made Visions entirely in GarageBand, so
that's a good answer. Is start out with something free and then grow up from there. See if you can get like a light version of something, try it out. If you don't like it, try something else out. There's more competition now. Persona Studio One seems to be something that's really, like, I keep hearing, oh, you should try it out. You should try it out. So maybe take a look at that.
Boom. And again, some great crowdsourced things. Audacity, yes, free, open source. I know a lot of people that cut their teeth with Audacity. And Blair, Studio One. There you go, an endorsement. I think an endorsement for Personas. Here we go. This is a great one to end it on. Thank you, everybody. We'll wrap it up after this. But Harrison, what are you currently working on, and or what are you excited about coming up in the near future as the person that penned our awesome post-COVID editorial that you can download?
That was a lot of fun to write. I wrote that on a farm through circumstance, living close to my parents to take care of them a bit. And so yada, yada, yada. I'm now working on some of my own music for a change. And I'll be honest, I'm actually kind of excited about that, sort of mirroring a lot of things that we talked about today. I'm an artist too. Like I like to create music, and I have a good collection of songs that I'm going to be releasing one at a time, which I think is the smarter way to go these days for many reasons. And so, yeah, that will come out soon. I'm wrapping up a music video. Most people don't know about this right now, so it's kind of an exclusive. This is actually an exclusive release. I've never mentioned this before in a public setting. So, oh, now I have to do it. Oh no! See, there's that inner fear. It's in me too. It's all there. I just really good at pretending it isn't. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe it's there, but my own music.
There you go. And Canadian musician, we just want to keep bringing you the goods to navigate the pre-COVID, already an incredibly snaky, challenging, one-of-a-kind career, and that's only been exacerbated about tenfold. But as we're doing here, yeah, doing our best to bring you information, career development, keep things going. Something before we close it out, Harrison?
Yeah, with the whole COVID thing and the music industry being really tough these days, even prior to that, every single person that's ever really, they always kind of shared a similar sentiment from my research anyway, where they said, do it for you or else there's no reason to do it at all. And now that is more true than ever before. Whether you don't have to care about anything I said at all. None of it has to comply. You don't have to live stream. You don't have to do any of this. What matters is having fun for you. And if you do that better than anybody, then there's a chance maybe somebody's going to listen to you. And so that's kind of if there's any one takeaway, it's remember why you got into music in the first place and never let that go.
Brilliant. Yes, thank you everybody for joining us. Harrison Fine in particular, harrisonfine.ca with 2 R's. I'm very sorry. harrisonfine.ca, Fine Productions, thrilled to have the expertise. Come back in 4 weeks plus 2 days. We are going to zoom right into the nitty gritty of the pre-production process. nwcwebinars.com is where you can go. You'll be able to register for that first thing tomorrow morning. And while you're there, you can access our archive of dozens of these webinars covering everything from getting your music synced into TV and movies. We've got the legend Alan Cross about how you can get onto the radio. We've got crowdfunding for musicians, one and only Laser Milena Weber. There's a trove of stuff there for you. You will get an email within 24 hours of now with the link to a recording of this session. And we appreciate it. Hope everyone's staying well, staying safe. Harrison, it was a treat. Thank you a ton for doing this.
It was a blessing. I'm really glad. Thank you for offering.
Much love. All right, I'm going to lose everyone. We'll wrap this up here. And yeah, cheers until next time.